Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 5 of What's New in SwaggerHub Explore. We have a really exciting update today that I'm delighted to talk to you about. And it is that we have now launched the integration between SwaggerHub Explore and the core SwaggerHub offering itself. And we'll be jumping straight into the details of that integration. But maybe Temil, a few words from you as product manager. What does this mean for you? I can imagine it's been a milestone you've been really looking forward to.
Oh yes, definitely. So this was always part of the inception of what Explore is going to be, is being able to tie into a much broader aspect to solve problems both on consumers and producer side, to really take API exploration to the next level and make it very easy to understand what they're doing, evaluate APIs, to do quick tests without having to have to search for endpoints or a lot of data. So I'm very excited to present this to everybody today.
Great. Okay, well, we'll jump straight into the demo. So we'll be covering three interesting touch points in the bidirectional integration. So the first one will be about kind of browsing SwaggerHub and being able to import APIs from SwaggerHub directly into Explore to allow you to, as quickly as possible, explore all of those different endpoints and combinations and persist those requests. We'll then jump over to looking at it from a SwaggerHub perspective and launching Explore from natively within SwaggerHub, either at the API level or specifically at a particular path or route. And we also have a very nice capability in Explore to be able to automatically generate API definitions from transactions that you've already executed or persisted as a space connection. Okay, so jumping straight over. So here within SwaggerHub Explore, which you're all familiar with now at this point, there is a new option in the left-hand menu, which is SwaggerHub. So I'm going to just quickly jump over to SwaggerHub first so you get a feeling for what we will talk about. So here is my SwaggerHub account. I have access to a few organizations on the left-hand side, and within the organizations I see different APIs. And what I'm now able to do within Explore is click on SwaggerHub, and I'm allowed to search against that registry or that catalog of APIs. I can have it automatically filtered to my hub, so it's kind of ignoring all of the public APIs that are out there, and it's focusing on APIs within the boundary of the organizations that I have direct access to. Right now it's limited to browsing and searching for OpenAPI 3.0 definitions, but I can also filter on the visibility, whether or not they're public or private, the state, published or unpublished, and the owner. So I can filter by a specific organization, which I'm going to do for now. So I'm going to filter on the Frank Commons organization. And what I can do is I can then see different information about the APIs. So information about the last updated, the description, the type of definition that's been used, the last saved date, who the owner is, who created it, and the created date, and so on and so forth. I'm going to click on this Pets and Adoptions API. So that's now going to import different semantics about the API into Explore. So I get a breakdown of the different resources and operations that are available. I can click on one of those and I get a pre-populated execution pane, which has taken the server information, the path information, and it's populated all of the headers and parameters for me so that I can immediately interact with that API. So now I can send a request to the API and I get some valid information back. I can do all of the good stuff as I always could do. I can now save that API request to a space. If I look at my transaction history, I can see that request is there. So it's really, really beneficial. So Temil, for this specific integration point, what's the feedback that you've been getting from users?
It really helps out. It solves a problem of discoverability, right? Does this API work for me? really quickly. You can make decisions and not have to, jump from one tool to another to really understand the API. So it's really helped users ensure that they find what they need. With these, they can explore it, understand what data, these APIs accept, what, the responses are for that, and if it will work for them, if it will work for their use case. And again, this you can do all of this inside of one tool. It's again very, very powerful.
Exactly. And thinking about that, trying to meet the experience of users and where users kind of enjoy interacting with the specific APIs. I think it's very cool that the integration itself is bidirectional from the start. So I'm going to jump over to SwaggerHub now, and I'm going to go into that same API, so the Pet and Adoptions API. And immediately what I see here is I have this Open and Explore button. So I can actually click on that button and that will launch Explore. And again, this is the same view that you would have seen a moment ago. It's just a different entry point into that experience. So really, again, quickly allowing me to kind of navigate the API definition and design more from a pure exploratory perspective. So taking me away from the docs a little bit and getting me into the act of actually consuming that API. Looking also into the API definition and the details itself, I can be browsing a specific resource path, and from here there also is an Explore icon within the Swagger UI implementation in SwaggerHub. Clicking on that will again bring me specifically into SwaggerHub Explore with that particular path and operation ready for me to send a request to the endpoint. So if I was just looking at the post pets, for example, I can just grab the sample request. I can go into Explore. I can go to the body and I can put in that JSON and I can send that. And indeed, I can see that that request was successful and I'm getting a 201 response back. So again, Temil, the bidirectional aspect, why did you decide to do that from the start? Why did you think that was so important?
So there's two perspectives on this. First off, if I'm an API producer and I'm following a design first approach, I can really drive into the developer experience, right? When designing APIs, you really want to put yourself in the shoes of the person that's going to be consuming this, right? Does this make sense? And this allows you to, because you're in SwaggerHub, you can easily mock out the API and then move over to Explore to, again, try different parameters, understand different data sets, and really step into the shoes of who will be consuming this and understand, will this API be easily consumed, right? And that's from a producer's perspective. Mm-hmm. From a consumer perspective, maybe you're driving through documentation, trying to understand what this API does, understand the permutations of everything, and sure, you have the tryout button right there, but it doesn't allow you to really try a lot of different parameters, right? It may allow you to import different information in the body to try out your posts and deletes, but when it comes to trying out different headers and different resource paths and making things a little bit more dynamic, it's really hard to do within the tryout. So being able to go and jump into Explore, which is specialized in exploring APIs, makes that experience so much easier for the user.
Yeah, exactly. You can quickly start kind of, saving off these different permutations to a space, and they're there ready for you to kind of validate and to kind of discuss and ensure that that is indeed how we expected the API to behave, which I think is very useful. Okay, so on to the last feature for now as part of this exciting integration. We also have the ability within Explore to start looking at some of the spaces that I already have. And for example, perhaps these endpoints are not already documented in SwaggerHub. Maybe it's a heritage API that we've inherited. We can't find the documentation for it, but we do know the endpoint, and we have used Explore to explore that endpoint and learn how the API works. So we have some connections. So here I have a payees API. And when I look at the API connection level, I now have the ability to export this API to Swagger Hub. So what this is going to do is it's going to automatically create an API definition based on some of the transaction information that has been persisted within Explore. It's going to create an OpenAPI 3.1 definition, and it's going to then export that into SwaggerHub, and then that will allow me, or it will allow my team, to ensure that the API is conformant with any of the standards and guidelines that we're trying to implement from an organizational level. And we can quite quickly then start enriching that documentation. So it's giving us a very, very useful kind of bootstrap way to get started with the API definition based off actual learnings as to how the API itself is performing. So I'm going to hit this Explore button. I'm just going to give the API a name, give the API a version number. I'm going to select the organization that this API should be exported to, and I'm going to set the visibility. I'm just going to set it to private for demonstration purposes. I'm going to hit that continue button, and I already get a modal pop up here to say that the payee's API 3 version 1.0.0 has been successfully exported to SwaggerHub, and immediately I can click on that view definition button, and this will bring me into the SwaggerHub API editing experience, and I can see the Swagger UI rendering again this kind of basic bootstrapped version of the API definition. I'm already getting some feedback here from a standardization perspective that we have some rule validations. That's rule validations against the custom rules, or what we kind of determine to be a good API from an organizational perspective. This isn't quite conforming to that, so it allows me to take the next steps to improve this API and give it every chance at being more successful and more widely adopted into the future. So on this feature, Temil, I think this is really cool. This is really beneficial, especially for getting maybe teams that have been applying a code first approach and getting them a very, very quick way to automatically generate the definitions and get them into that overarching kind of portfolio of APIs to make them more discoverable. What's the feedback been like so far on this feature?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of RESTful APIs are still not documented, right? So it's hard to drive adoption when you have your consumers kind of guess what your endpoints do. So this really gives you a boilerplate of the definition for the APIs that you have explored, as Frank showed, and really gets you a step further, right? Obviously, it's not perfect. You may need to tweak it to ensure that it's following standards that have been implemented by your organizations. But that's the whole point, right? You have a really good starting point, and then you need to go in and make the tweaks to add more meat to documentation and make sure that it's conforming with the standards that your organization has implemented. So again, it's trying to drive adoption to make sure that you have well documented APIs, and you don't have to write it from scratch. We're auto generating the boilerplate for that APIs for you. So again, really good feedback. Again, gets users a step further. Don't have to start from scratch, and it's a really good move forward motion if you're using SwaggerHub as well, to make sure that it's cataloged correctly in there.
Absolutely. So giving those APIs every opportunity to be discovered and consumed. So thanks very much, everyone. We're really excited to be able to bring you these latest updates. If you do want to try and play with SwaggerHub Explore, it is a free tool. The URL is there. Feedback is always welcome. Temil, as always, thanks so much for participating.
Sure thing. Happy exploring, everybody.
Happy exploring, everyone. Bye-bye.